On today's show, you're going to get my preseason top 25, as well as I'm going to talk about a few other topics in the world of college football. So let's get right into it. I'm doing my top 25 different this year in terms I'm not putting all the rankings on one page. So let's get into it. Start with my preseason top 25 honorable mentions, and I have 4 teams in here. And my rankings, as you know, my rankings will be changing weekly. So my honorable mentions for the preseason top 25 are the James Madison Dukes, the Clemson Tigers, Virginia Tech Hokies, and the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. So let's start with James Madison. They have a new head coach in Billy Napier. Coach Napier comes over from Florida, where he was unfortunately let go because the Gators, as you know, moved on and hired John Summerall to be their new head coach. So Napier goes back to the Sun Belt, where he had a lot of success at Louisiana, which led him to getting the job with the Gators. But James Madison, they did lose a lot of guys. Bob Chesney took a lot of his guys from James Madison with him to UCLA. So I will say James Madison might be in the rankings at some point this year. I don't know when. The next team is the Clemson Tigers. And Clemson, Dabo is actually starting to use the portal, which is a little scary for everybody. If he can learn to use the portal and use it correctly, Clemson could be back, everybody. And that's a scary sight for the entire country, not just the ACC, not just Tank Conference. But here's the thing with Clemson. They lost a lot on offense and defense last year. Adam Randall's gone. Antonio Williams is gone. Cade Klubnik's gone. There's 3 guys on offense. You lost Avion Terrell on defense and a few other guys on defense as well. But it's Dabo Swinney. And we know these big programs, they don't rebuild, they reload. And Clemson's reloaded. The next ACC team I have on my honorable mentions is Virginia Tech. Out with the old and with the new. No more Brett Pry as head coach. Coach Pry is still on the staff at Virginia Tech, however. He is retaking the defense coordinator role at Virginia Tech. The new head coach is a guy that everybody knows pretty well. It is James Franklin. Big Game James. And I think we might see Virginia Tech in the rankings a lot. And I can say this, I think there's not a lot of big games in the ACC. So I think with consistency, we will see Virginia Tech do really good. And the last team of my honorable mentions is Georgia Tech, the Yellow Jackets. They lost Haynes King. They lost Jamal Haynes. Justice Haynes comes in. They lost Jamal Haynes, who left and went to another school, but they still have Brett Key as their head coach. I believe that Georgia Tech will be another team that all these teams in my honorable mentions, I believe will be ranked at some point. We get into the preseason top 25 through 21. At number 25, I have the South Florida Bulls. With new head coach Brian Hartline, and here's what I want everybody to know, is Brian Hartline was able to keep 53 guys from last year's team in Tampa, as well as bringing in 16 transfers. And nobody's getting a handout and getting a starting spot right away. Everybody has to earn it. And the American is wide open. It could be South Florida that wins the American. It could be Memphis. You never know who. The other thing with South Florida is you look at their schedule. Last year, they had the toughest strength of schedule. They had the hardest schedule in the American last year. This year, they have the easiest schedule in college football, which means one of two things. Either they're going to only lose one game, or two, they might lose two games, but they will have a shot at the college football playoff if they can get lucky. At number 24 is a team that they're that little, and keep repeating this, they are that gnat that you think you slapped and they're gone. But no, they're still there. It is the Iowa Hawkeyes. And Iowa, they have always been known for defense. Their offense has been subpar. But I think if you can get a mixture of good offense, of a decently good offense this year and a really good defense, Iowa could be scary. And a team I'm going to talk about later in my rankings, Ohio State. Ohio State has to go to Kinnick Stadium this year and play Iowa. What is the phrase I have coined? Ranked teams go to Kinnick to die or to lose their undefeated season or ranking. Put that on a shirt. It'll make a lot of money. That is number 24. 23, the Memphis Tigers. It is no more Ryan Silverfield. He is now at Arkansas. It is now the era of my personal favorite coach in college football, Charles Huff. And Coach Huff, I think this was the perfect hire for Memphis after Silverfield left. And you knew that Huff wasn't going to stay at Southern Miss very long. If he got the opportunity to jump ship and go to a bigger group of five school. And Memphis, which is located in Memphis, Tennessee, is a very good group of five school. And I like that he did bring some of his guys from Southern Miss, but he's also, I've done my research, he's also kept some of the guys that were on the Memphis team last year and was able to get them to come back. At number 22 are the Baylor Bears. This is a big year for Dave Aranda. And Baylor, they did, Sawyer Robertson is gone. They did go out in the portal and bring back home to the state of Texas, DJ Lagway. DJ Lagway is a Texas boy, a Texas kid. I think Baylor is in for a really good year in the Big 12. And if you don't believe me, go back and watch my Big 12 preview that I did on this show and on College Football Gridiron. On Gridiron Talk with Brad, which the 25th is our next episode of that. But not to get off topic. And Baylor also plays in the Big 12, which, as you've heard me talk about numerous times on this show, the Big 12 is the chaos conference. There could be one week where a score, let's say Baylor's playing Texas Tech. The score could be 55-50. But then the next week it's TCU playing Kansas, and the score is 10-7. So you get both sides of the sword. You get a game one week that's really high scoring. You get a game next week that's a defensive slugfest, a defensive struggle, and neither team can score more than 10 points. At number 21, I have the Southern California Trojans. And like I said about Dave Aranda, this is a huge year for Lincoln Riley. Jaden Mayava's back. They've got most of their offensive weapons back other than Micaiah Lemon and Jacoby Lane. And I'm liking what I've seen from fall camp from Southern Cal. And it does look like that the Southern Cal has kind of found a defense, which if they can get all three phases of the game up to date, watch out for them to be really big contenders in the Big Ten. Preseason top 25, 20 through 15. And you're going to see some teams in here that, in this part of the rankings, that you might not agree with. Give me your preseason top 25 in the comment section below. And let's see if we have any teams in common or if you have different teams where I have certain teams ranked. At number 20, I have the Houston Cougars. And nobody expected Willie Fritz to turn Houston around this quick. They had a 10-win season last year. And Connor Wegman's back. They've got a lot of offensive weapons back. Their defense running in the form toward the end of last season. And I'm buying into that Houston is that sleeper in the Big 12 that nobody wants to play. And Houston's not notoriously known for being a football school until recently when Willie Fritz has gotten there. The previous coaches they've had have had a few decent seasons, but since Willie Fritz has gotten there, he's turned Houston around. At number 19, and I'm going to say that before I say the team, I know what y'all are going to say. You're an Ohio State fan. That is why Michigan's not in the top 15. I mean, the top 10. No. I'm an unbiased Ohio State fan. I do not like Michigan, but out of respect, I did put them in the top 20. They are at number 19, the Michigan Wolverines. And I do know some Michigan fans, and they have told me that they are impressed with this new coaching staff that Michigan has, with Kyle Whittingham and all the position coaches, and Jason Beck, the offensive coordinator, which, as an offensive coordinator, Jason Beck scares me. I got to watch him last year when he was the offensive coordinator at Utah. Not in person, but I watched a lot of Utah games. And that offense was high-flying, physical. They could run the ball. They could throw it. I think this was a good hire for Michigan, but I don't think Whittingham's going to be around that long. I think he's grooming Jason Beck to be the next head coach, like he did with Morgan Scalley at Utah. But the one pushback I have with Michigan is, are we going to get an improved Bryce Underwood? Because if we get an improved Bryce Underwood, then Michigan should be in playoff contention. But if we get a Bryce Underwood that's maybe 65, 70% better than he was last year, Michigan's probably going 8-4 and missing the playoff again. And people are going to start the conversation. Is it time to already get rid of Kyle Whittingham? At number 18, I have the BYU Cougars. Kalani Sitake's back. Bear Bachmeier's back. They did lose a couple of offensive players to the NFL. But again, they're another team. Their NIL's decent enough where they can just reload at certain positions. And I think BYU is another one of those teams in the Big 12 that at the end of the year, you could see them in the Big 12 title game. At number 17, and I know I'm going to get a lot of slack for this, is Penn State. Because some people have Penn State in their top 10. I'm not that bullish on Penn State. I do like the Mike Campbell hire. I do like that he brought over a bunch of his guys from Iowa State. And they have one of the easier schedules in the Big Ten. They don't play Ohio State. They don't play Oregon. They do have to play Michigan, which that's fine. fine and dandy. But other than that, they don't play the big three. I don't believe they play Indiana. I know they don't play Ohio State, and I know they don't play Oregon. If they do play Michigan, like I said, and that's going to be a good game. At number 16, I have the Tennessee Volunteers. And Tennessee fans, I want you to listen to me very closely. I am going to the Texas-Tennessee game this year. And I've been hearing conflicting reports from fall camp on who the starting quarterback's going to be. I've heard from a few Tennessee fans I know, Mr. Robbie Culleton being one, shout out to Robbie, that George McIntyre's going to be the starter this year, but don't be surprised if you see a little phase on Brandon. Here's the guys that do return for Tennessee this year. Mikey Matthews, Braylon Staley, Deshaun Bishop. They did have issues in the offseason with Chaz Coleman, the transfer from Penn State. But that's water under the bridge now. Chaz Coleman is no longer in Knoxville. But I believe Tennessee, if they beat Georgia Tech in week 2, I do believe that Tennessee can stay in the rankings relatively long. At number 15 is SMU, the Pony Express, the SMU Mustangs. And I read something before the show. Actually, I read something yesterday that Kevin Jennings does have a finger injury, but I don't think it's serious. I think he'll be ready for week 1. But you have him back. You have Brett Lashley back, who decided to stay and not go to another school. And SMU, I really think they could sneak up on people in the ACC this year and be one of the big-time contenders in the ACC. Now we get to the top preseason top 25, 14 through 8. At number 14, I have the Louisville Cardinals. And I'm intrigued to see what Jeff Brom can do with Lincoln Kienholz. Because Lincoln Kienholz was at Ohio State, but he got stuck behind a couple of good Ohio State quarterbacks. In C.J. Stroud and not C.J. Stroud, but Will Howard and Jillian Saying. So he decided to hop in the transfer portal and go to Louisville, which is not a bad idea because Jeff Brom knows how to develop quarterbacks. Miller Moss is in the NFL now. And I like Louisville's another team that I would kind of consider a sleeper in the ACC this year. At number 13, I have the Texas Tech Red Raiders. And let's fast forward back to, before I tell you why they are where they are, we're going to fast forward a little bit. We're going to rewind, actually, a little bit back to the transfer portal and them getting Brandon Swordsby. If they still have Brandon Swordsby at this point, they would be probably top 7 in my rankings. But they don't have Brandon Swordsby because I'm not going to get completely into that situation with Mr. Swordsby, but the reason I have him at 13 is because they have unproven talent at quarterback in Will Hammond, who is coming back from an ACL injury. But it looks like Micah Hudson is going to be one of your starting receivers this year, which is not bad. I don't mind it. But how healthy is Will Hammond going to be week 1? And are you only going to see him for a half because Texas Tech is playing a cupcake game week 1? And I don't think they want Will Hammond to re-injure that hamstring because it takes that ACL correction. But you still have Joey McGuire as a head coach who signed an extension. And Texas Tech is another team. They were in the Big 12 title game last year, won the Big 12, and made the playoff. If they can do that again with Will Hammond at quarterback this time, I don't see an issue of why they can't make the playoff for the second year in a row. At number 12, I have the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. And I know what people are going to say. Oh, they are number 5 in the coaches AP poll preseason, the preseason coaches poll. I don't care about that. I do my rankings on a different criteria than the coaches poll. Because the coaches poll is a bunch of garbage. I think all these YouTubers, we all need to unite and have our own set of college football rankings. But back to Notre Dame. The only reason I have them at 12 is I'm kind of punishing them for last year for chickening out of the Pop-Tart Bowl because they're little crybabies because they didn't make the playoff and then they got invited to a bowl game and said, no, since we didn't make the playoff, we're not going to that bowl game, which caused some of those kids. Yes, they had a bunch of guys drafted, but those guys could have been drafted even higher if Notre Dame decided to play in a bowl game. And the only other reason I have them at 12 is I'm not buying the CJ Carr hype. He has one. He started 1 year. One. And I do like Marcus Freeman is a really good head coach. Don't get me wrong on that. At number 11, I have the Alabama Crimson Tide. And Alabama fits. It's a love-hate relationship between me and you guys. I'm going to try to be a lot more respectful to you this year and rank you honestly. Right now, I have you at 11 because I don't know who your quarterback's going to be. If there is any Alabama fans in the stream, please tell me who you think is going to be your starting quarterback. Other than that, you have Kalen DeBoer as your head coach. And Kalen DeBoer, yes, I know there's some Bama fans that want him gone because he's not Nick Saban. I say give him at least 2 more years. If he doesn't do anything this year or in 2027, then we can start the talk of maybe it's time to look for a new name. But I'm telling you, and you tell me if this sounds enticing. What if Florida State fires Mike Norvell and DeBoer gets hired by Florida State? Would you call up LSU? Would you call up Lane Kiffin and ask him to come be the head coach at Alabama? Let me know down in the comments. I was just picking Miami. I noticed it was wrong. But at number 10, I have the Oklahoma Sooners, who made the playoff last year with a slightly healthy John Mateer. This year, I hope we can get a fully healthy John Mateer that stays healthy the entire season, doesn't get hurt. And Brett Venables showed us last year that he knows how to build a defense. If Oklahoma can get that same type of defense that they had last year, this year, look up. At number 9, I have the Miami Hurricanes. And yes, I know Miami was just in the national championship game and lost to Indiana. I am putting Miami here because they lost a lot. They lost Carson Beck. They lost a bunch of guys. They lost Keontae Scott on defense, Akeem Mesidor on defense, Ruben Payne on defense, and a few other guys on defense and offense. So, but don't feel bad, Miami fans, because you're still inside the top 10, which is good. At number 8, I have the Utah Utes. They still have Morgan Scalley as the new head coach, but they returned 2 guys. 3, Wayshawn Parker being the running back. And then they returned Bert Ficklin and Devin Dampier, our quarterback. Utah is going to be right back in the thick of it in the Big 12. I still feel awkward saying that Utah's in the Big 12. I just, that doesn't feel right. Top 25, preseason top 25, 7 through 1. At number 7, I have the Texas Longhorns. I am not believing the Arch Manning hype. Can we please stop hyping up Arch? Like, please. It's just, it is the most tumultuous, annoying thing ever. And now people are trying to say, oh, Jeremiah Smith has competition for the best receiver in college football with Cam Coleman. No. Cam Coleman has to have a good year to at least get his name maybe into that conversation. And Texas plays Ohio State in week 2 in Austin. And that's going to be a big game. If Texas beats Ohio State, which I don't think is going to happen personally, but that's just me, then we can talk about Texas being the number 1 team in the country. At number 6, I have the Oregon Ducks. Dante Moore's back. They have the Corian Moore coming in. They have Evan Stewart coming back. They have Jacoby Johnson at tight end after Kenyon Sadiq just went to the NFL. Here's my confidence level that Oregon wins the national championship this year. It is right here. Ohio State, Indiana are up here. Oregon, Miami are right here. I do like Dan Lanning. I think Oregon is the closest team out of maybe Texas A&M. I think Oregon wins the national championship before Texas A&M does. At number 5 is Georgia. And again, Georgia's another team that I get in hot water with their fan base all the time because of where I ranked it. I'm going to respectfully rank them this year, regardless of how I feel. At number 4, I have the Texas A&M Aggies. They were another team that made the playoff last year, but they laid an egg in the first round of the playoff. Marcel Reed is back. Terry Bussey's back. Mike Elko's back for another year. I think A&M could make the playoff again. At number 3, I have the LSU Tigers. It's obvious. Lane Kiffin, good coach. I know Ole Miss fans are going to disagree with me on that. But I think LSU could make the playoff this year. At number 2 are the Ohio State Buckeyes. And again, non-biased. Ohio State did lose a lot on offense and defense last year. They lost Carnell Tate. They lost a few offensive linemen. But they have the best wide receiver in the game coming back, Jeremiah Smith. And a guy that's in contention for the Heisman this year, Julian Sayin coming back too. On defense, Jermaine Matthews Jr. is back. They went out and got Terry Moore and Earl Little Jr. For defense. And of course, we know, like I've said about the other big team, blue bloods in college football, Ohio State doesn't rebuild. They reload. And at number 1 is the defending national champion, Indiana Hoosiers. I know, again, the preseason coaches poll is out, and Indiana is not number 1. You've heard my opinion about that in a previous video. Indiana, until they lose, they will probably be number 1. And the week 1 top 25 rankings will be out September 3rd. And they might not change as much, but there will be a few changes. And before I get off of this page, let me explain how my rankings work so everybody understands. So the way my rankings work is you win 2 games, you're in. You lose 2 games, you drop out of the rankings. You win by 10 or more points, you move up in the rankings. You lose by 10 or more points, you move down. And the same thing applies. If you lose 2 games in a row, you're out of the rankings. But there's always a chance that you can climb back in. And I added this last year when I did the rankings. Top 25 wins count too. So like, for example, LSU Clemson. If Clemson beats LSU week 1, Clemson, if they aren't in the week 1 rankings, if they are, they move up because that becomes a top 25 win. And that wraps up that portion of the video. And actually, that does it for today's show. If you've enjoyed, please remember, subscribe, like, turn on notifications. Have a wonderful rest of your Monday. I will be back here tomorrow with a new podcast debuting called Alec Talks Life. Please join and give me your questions. College football episodes return on next Tuesday.